Tell me what the significance of this is for your family. I mean, it's obviously your close family. Yeah, good.
Yeah, well, I'm the baby of the 12 children, and actually Mom lost one child between my sisters Patricia and Kathy. So Mom bore, and this was just before the end of the term of the pregnancy, so Mom bore 13 children. Mm-hmm. She said as a little girl she wanted to have 12 children for the Lord and bring them up in the church. Mm-hmm. As a little girl, she said that. Mm-hmm. She was called to heaven in January of 2012. Mm-hmm. And David's vocation to the priesthood, when he initially was going to talk to anyone about that, he called Mom. Mm-hmm. And he asked her just simply, because that's David, how does Father David sound? Yeah. So she thought that was incredible. David received his first communion with Bishop Michael Sis.
Okay.
So Bishop Sis and David are in the first communion class of St. Joseph in a photo together. So those two gentlemen those two kids are growing up in Bryant and received first communion together and went through school together. And as David said, they ran kind of in different circles. Mm-hmm. When David was graduating high school, his eye was on working as a machinist, which he'd been doing part-time as a student for a couple of years. He actually bought in and owned half of a machine shop in downtown Bryant, and was looking at buying out the man that owned the other half and doing that for a living. Long hair, motorcycles. Man, I thought David was the coolest guy as a little kid. Still do, but in different ways. But anyway, David always had a beautiful and gentle heart. Mm-hmm. He worked with the youth group at St. Joseph a lot, was very familiar with the Monsignor there, and in time, I think what David did was draw closer to Monsignor and fall in love with the idea of living your life in the service of others. Mm-hmm. So he wasn't just a parishioner there. I think that true friendship, both helping with the youth group and preparing communion and doing all that David did with the church, he eventually became just in love with the concept of that being his bride, his vocation. Mm-hmm. So he called Mom and asked, how does Father David sound? Of course, she thought it sounded great. Mm-hmm. David did not go right through seminary. He didn't start seminary right out of high school. Mm-hmm. He didn't breeze through. He left seminary to live with a holy group of monks twice, and prayer and lots of discernment of what he should be doing. So David is a very holy priest. Mm-hmm. I know that sounds redundant, but his prayer life and every morning with the Eucharist at 5 a.m., I mean, his prayer life is admirable. Mm-hmm. And spending the time with the monks, I think, discerning, should he lead a life of prayer for others, which are beautiful, beautiful vocation that so many monks are called to, or should he serve as a parish priest? And for me, it was a hands down. I mean, the guy's talents and his abilities, I thought, would make an incredible parish priest. But David listened to what God had him figure out during that time of discernment. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't just in the priesthood, but what type of priest he should be. Mm-hmm. As David neared the end of his vocation, he even worked in temple for a time, and left his studies for a short time and lived and had a little workshop in temple. And he was his pastoral year was in temple, working as a chaplain. Mm-hmm. So he experienced so many things during this discernment time and this study time of becoming a priest, and was ordained on June 3rd of 1995. And a year and 5 days later, married me and my wife. Okay. Baptized all our children. But David's time as a priest has been leading up to whatever the Lord calls him to do, and in this case, whatever the Lord told told the Pope he wanted him to do. Mm-hmm. And in this time, when David was asked to be a bishop, if I were in that room, I bet the conversation would have been short if I watched it. And it would have been an overwhelming surprise and then a total surrender. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, just listening to David and him describing it, I'll bet you that's exactly what happened. And it's just a total surrender to what God wants him to do. My brother Joe, I thought, put it so beautifully when he said David separates himself a little from it being about David and being more about the work. Mm-hmm. David sees the vocation and what needs to be done, the work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And just as the Lord utilizes him in different capacities to do that work, he says yes. And here the Lord's going to utilize him as a bishop. And his simple answer was yes, which I'm sure relieved the nuncio. So David honored me to ask me to build his ring with the bishop's ring. And with Pope John Paul, with St. John Paul II being such, I think, an integral part of David's vocation, it didn't surprise me that his ring is going to be modeled after St. John Paul's ring, which is called the fisherman's ring. From above, it runs down the finger, about 19 millimeters. And from the side, it's just a band around the hand. On David's ring, we'll be using the melted wedding ring from our late mother. My sister Nita was blessed to inherit Mom's wedding ring. It's a simple quarter-carat round diamond on a yellow gold band. And on David's ring, and in the picture here, you can see David and I holding the ring. We will be taking we've taken the diamond now, and the sister Nita, who was so generous to offer the ring up to David, the sister Nita will keep that diamond, and I've melted the ring so that we can use it in the ring that we'll be building for David. This ring includes gold then from my mother's wedding ring. It includes the things that David wanted to represent, the peace through Christ on the side. On the other side, a single rose. This is in honor of our Mother Mary, the mother of Jesus. On top, we have the Sacred Heart of Christ with the Mozambique garnet, the flame of the cross, and then the thorns going across. This is the work I was honored to be asked to do, but essentially these are David's ideas for the ring.
Chuck, tell me about your parents. Yeah, I know. I mean, your dad wasn't. I wasn't really talk. But raising 12 kids. Yeah.
So, boy, Mom and Dad. Mom was 5 foot tall on a good day. Mm-hmm. Just really incredible personality. Strong Catholic, all the way from her upbringing. She's a Yankee. She's from Youngstown, Ohio, and during her high school years, they moved down here to Texas, and I think she was a little surprised to see that we actually weren't all riding horses. only some of us. Dad was raised south of Dallas on a farm. His dad, my grandfather, was a Polish self-taught tool and die guy, an inventor, and it's pretty amazing when you look at his mind with no formal training and the things that he built. He had 19 patents to his name when he died.
Oh wow!
But amazing that with a slide rule and common sense and trial and error, what he could build, a tool and die guy, and he could build anything, he could fix anything. And so now you fast forward over to his grandson, my oldest brother David, and it's not, the apple didn't fall far from the tree there. But dad's not a center of the party kind of guy. He speaks well and confidently. He was kind. He was firm. He was definitely strong in his faith as a Catholic, and made certain that we were all going to be raised with of course, as a team with Mom, we were all going to be raised in the faith. And they were definitely a team. It's amazing even now as a 43-year-old man to look back, as a father now to look back. There were times that they may have disagreed with each other. It didn't show to me. There was discipline. There was absolutely respect of your elders, of your faith, of those in vocation. At a young age, we went through Catholic Catechismal Doctrine, CCD. We're from Bryan. And all 12 of us kids, plus Mom and Dad, 14 of us, were raised in a home that's on a good day, maybe 1,400 square feet. I was wearing hand-me-downs in '84. I was wearing bell-bottoms in '84. That were my sisters. So I've got a good sense of humor, but I can fight like hell. But the family, when I look at my brothers and sisters kind of being the caboose as I am, I see so many myriads of different talents and strengths and weaknesses, and how over the years people have helped each other and carried on Mom and Dad's sense of having that team. Even now as adults, with my father needing more care, all 12 of us on a rotation to see after Dad's needs and help him. And he's doing fantastic, and his attitude is fantastic. But the family is all still working together. And I guess like any large family, people ask me all the time, what's it like growing up in such a big family? Well, what's it like not growing up in a big family? It's what I know. I know that it's special. that it's rare, that it teaches you an amazing amount of humility, a sense of humor, of sharing, of what's really important. Worldly things and shiny new things were certainly not something that we grew up with, not with a lot of. We certainly were not poor or destitute family. Mom and Dad worked very hard to make sure we had everything we needed. But we didn't drive new cars and we didn't wear new clothes and have new toys. But my mom and dad built a house with a yard that was constantly full of the neighborhood children. We were the house people wanted to be at. We were the house people played at. We were the house where if another parent wanted to see where their kid was, they could check our house first because it was full of love and fun. And it was beautiful. And now when I walk through those hallways, they probably wouldn't even be considered ADA accessible now. I mean, there was a house that my mom and dad bought in the late 50s, and they started adding on as they needed to add on. I mean, at one point we had a temporary building, like a construction trailer, literally tacked onto the house. Yeah. And it was beautiful. How mom and dad made it all work. How they made sure that we all loved each other. How they made sure that we were all going to be giving of each other and respect each other. And don't get me wrong, it was not the Partridge Family, yeah. But that's a made-for-TV thing, and there was a lot of reality there. Trust me, there were some times where there were clenched fists and raised voices. But looking back, my mom and dad's vocation was their marriage and their family, and to heck with everything else. And at 43, now with my 7th child on the way, that simplicity is becoming more and more attractive to me, and something that I'm hoping to model my family after. It'd be easier if mom was still with us.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too. Communion with saints is a big part of our faith, but it's funny how so many Catholics don't always grasp that. But mom knew of David's excuse me. Mom knew of David's call to the bishop's position before the Pope did. That's rather amazing to me, that she's there in heaven. And it's difficult for me to even verbalize the joy that I have at the thought of her face, realizing her son's vocation would be used in this way. And the news of this put a huge smile on my face, and instantly a little bit of defensive, maybe worrying for the transition time and what will be asked of my brother. But a deep, deep joy and honor. But the thought of my mom's life's work, my father's life's work, and their vocation as husband and wife and as heads of this family that was raised to love Jesus, and the joy that mom must feel knowing her son's vocation is now being used in this way. That's a thought that it's hard to verbalize what that means to me, but it put me physically to my knees, and all I could do is praise God. And it's a beautiful thought to see mom's face when she found that out about her son's vocation.
And everyone's excited for your brother.
Oh man, when he rolls up in that dusty truck and starts pulling out fishing gear and woodworking equipment, people in Oklahoma are gonna be like, "Man, they got this one right." Excuse me, I'm nothing against you.
No, trust me, they'll love it.
He'll fit right in.
Yeah, guaranteed.
Yeah, he's gonna fit right in.
Yeah, well,
as you guys come to know him, you'll see what I mean. I mean, he's just a treat of a man to know. That's not just because I'm his brother. I mean, that's an objective opinion. He's a treat of a man to know. And in this day and age, where the world is further and further away from the teachings of Christ, and how we are debating the most simple laws of nature as to whether or not our feelings allow them to be laws, and as we tear each other apart in the political arena, to have David come in and so gently and lovingly give God's very inclusive but truthful teachings. As a bishop, as a priest, I've enjoyed watching it. As a bishop, I'm going to love watching it, because our world is so lost. But the Lord's message is not one of hate or divisiveness. It's not one of judgment. It's one of love. It's one of love. This is the year of mercy. Couldn't be a more perfect year for David to become ordained a bishop. And his ministry and his word is truthful, and it's absolutely abiding to the Catholic teachings, but it is merciful and full of love. And that's one thing that I think makes him so effective, especially in this world that is so darkened by sin, that gentle, loving light that he puts forth.